time we really are.
Yes, we're alive.
Apparently, perfect. So, what's up, peers? We hope you're alive. We don't know it yet. YouTube has changed something in the settings. We have no clue. Huge struggle getting on, but now we are. So let's start the conversation today here on the show that is co-uploaded to both the World Crypto Network and the Konsensus Ry YouTube channel. Let's see if YouTube is gonna let us at least share the screen. Oh, perfect. So we are here on the Konsensus Network, which is a network similar to the WCN with a bunch of different content creators bringing amazing videos and educational material. So please absolutely check it out. And then on the other hand, we are not yet streaming right on the YouTube channel for WCN. So let's get you all over there. So I'm joined today by two amazing guests. What the fuck? Can you still hear me? Oh, okay. So Niko, take over. I'm confused. Who are you? What are you doing? Where are you at?
All right, thank you, Max, for that awesome intro. Sorry, dear viewers, for the technical difficulties. It's GG time. It seems like again, and we don't know what is going on. We're trying to dual cast to both World Crypto Network and the Konsensus Network simultaneously. Sometimes it doesn't work as well as you might hope. Can you guys let us know if you can? How does it look in your end? Does it work? Can you hear me? Can you hear Max? Can you hear our other guest, Simon? And yeah, let's see if we can get this show on the road. And audience participation expected and wished for. And leave those likes as well. Simon, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure, I can hear you.
Go ahead, man.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad to be on again. Max invited me to the World Crypto Network a few weeks ago, and we had a nice little chat, and yeah, glad to speak to both of you again. So hello, chat.
Oh yeah, we have now everyone hopefully in the chat, so please be active. We're just going to have a nice little discussion today about what is going on in Bitcoin and in these fascinating times, and what the true potential and use cases for Bitcoin might be. So just a loose conversation about whatever we wanted to talk about. So maybe let's start off with a personal round. Niko, how do you actually use Bitcoin? So what is your personal primary use case?
Well, of course, from time to time I buy things with Bitcoin, but that I wouldn't say that's the main use case for me. The main use case for me is store of value. So I like to keep a lot of my assets there because I find it the best bet for me. And yeah, I use it for store of value mostly. But the only reason why it works as such a great store of value is because I know I can exchange it for anything I want on this world. So that brings me security. So that's a major use case for me.
Yeah, I would agree. If you talk about Bitcoin, I guess you would have to specify what exactly you mean by Bitcoin. Do you mean the UTXO? Do you mean the network? Do you mean the name? Because I definitely use the UTXOs as a store of value and sometimes a medium of exchange, and sometimes very, very rarely as a unit of account. But Bitcoin itself, I mean, the whole community and all the things that flow into it are a vehicle for education for me. I learned a lot on my small journey discovering the world of Bitcoin, and I met a few nice people like yourselves. And yeah, so it's more than just a store of value or a medium of exchange for me. It's way more than that.
Well, yeah, you bring up the good point, the real question about what Bitcoin truly is, and what this entire network actually is all about, because it's not just a currency, it's not just a payments network, it's not just a unit of account. It really is much more of a broader social experiment with a lot of different actors and incentive structures at play. So Niko, maybe could you go a bit more into detail on the different forms that you could use Bitcoin other than a money per se? Like, what are the use cases for, let's say, the blockchain in general?
Well, I don't like to talk about blockchain much because mostly of the sensational value and the part that it played in the recent crypto bubble, and is still we're suffering from the lingering effects with all these now tech startups, still trying to solve all the world's non-problems with blockchain technology, and that, yeah, of course, that can veer away from the actual true use cases, which I think digital money is. What was the question again?
Well, a bit about the use cases of Bitcoin other than a money per se.
Right. So at the base layer, Bitcoin is a censorship-resistant messaging protocol. So what you can really do is you can transact messages, which can be a transaction of a payment of goods or services, for example, that nobody can intercept because it's on an immutable ledger. So I would say that's, I don't know if that's what you mean by a different use case, but this is definitely something that maybe people don't think when they think about money and digital money, that actually what you're sending is messages, kind of like email for money, if that makes sense.
Simon, could you please go a bit more into the censorship-resistant aspect and why this is so important for the communications network of value?
Well, I would say if you aren't free to use your money for whatever use case you have for it, it's not really your money. It's the money of the person or entity who controls your money or censors your money. So in essence, Bitcoin is the only true money, except from cash and gold. But with cash, you obviously have the problem of the money supply growing and your cash being diluted and your purchasing power decreasing. So, but to answer your question about alternative use cases for Bitcoin, I would say that timestamping would be one of the use cases. For example, Peter Todd's Open Timestamps project is one of those, or there's several small projects that use the Bitcoin blockchain to timestamp certificates or like degrees from university or stuff like that. But there's still a few open questions to that, especially when it comes to where you store the actual data, because you only store the hash of the data on the Bitcoin blockchain. So you still need the original data. You just verify that data with the Bitcoin blockchain to see if it originated at a certain time in the past, if it existed at that time in the past. Because if it would not exist at that point, it would have been impossible to calculate the hash for that document. Hope that makes sense.
Oh yes, absolutely. And Open Timestamp is one of these things that Bitcoin really is useful for. It is a chain, a history of transactions, and this history can be used to be referred to for other things. And especially because the history of Bitcoin is unreversible. Quite soon after roughly 6 confirmations, after 6 blocks have been added to the Bitcoin blockchain, then it becomes quite hard of ever reversing the transaction and reversing history. So Niko, might Bitcoin be the first technology that lets us make history provably be not able to be unwritten or overwritten?
Well, I mean, we would have to, of course, winners define history and what becomes history. And of course, there's no way to record absolutely everything. But I do think that a lot of things are going to be immutable. And a lot of things can be recorded, just that we have a medium that we can record things that cannot be changed is, of course, immensely useful if you think about any kind of applications. But then again, yeah, if you need some kind of a provability, like what really happened, I don't know in which kind of situation that might prove useful, but at least it would give some line of truth, because right now the situation is that a lot of the history has been tampered with, really, like people have been removed from the history books and stuff like that happens all the time. So it becomes really difficult to trust the society and the mainstream media. So I guess that's one tool we can use to kind of try to reach this kind of information equilibrium where everything flows freely and is not restricted.
Yeah, exactly. It will be interesting to see what happens if data can actually be preserved into the future, because as you totally rightfully say, history is written by the winners, and it would be interesting to see what happens if history written by the losers of certain conflicts would also flow into the, I guess, history books a century away from the event at the time it happened. So you can already go on, I don't know what the site is called, but you can basically search through metadata on the Bitcoin blockchain to look at images and messages people put into it. And essentially, these messages and images will be preserved into, well, I guess, eternity, or that people are willing to pay miners to produce blocks. And if that ever dies down, okay, it will be erased, but there's no sign of that happening in the near future or even long-term future.
Oh yes, absolutely. And it is true that usually that group that can overpower the others is going to write the history and going to, kind of do that which he hopes is best for him in the long run. But what we see now is that history is not written by one individual, but by consensus. And this means that everyone kind of has a say in what is going to be put into this record by running your own Bitcoin full node, right? And with you enforcing this record of transactions, it means that you can never be stolen the right and the privilege to put stuff onto this data form, especially because mining is a dynamic set of members. And so anyone who wants to can become a miner, and if doing the work, right, if providing valid proof of work, add to this history. So no one is excluded from accessing and changing the data set, but still everyone is kind of being pushed towards this one consensus, towards this one Schelling point of the sound money, which is Bitcoin. So that is really interesting. How can this somehow can this censorship resistance and unchangeability of the history be further used?
I'll be glad to answer that question, but I would like to address something you said right before. You said that if I remember correctly, you said that basically information is going to flow into the blockchain by or via consensus. But is that right? I mean, basically it's a miner dictating what the next block is to the rest of the network, and the network will accept it if it matches the consensus rules. So the block going into the network and into the blockchain itself isn't an act of consensus, because you would have everyone to come to the agreement that that block is the right one, and then you would enter it to the other participants. But that doesn't happen. It's one single entity dictating what the block is, what goes into the block, and what the block hash is. And then if that's valid, it gets accepted by everyone else. So basically, it's not the information itself going into history in a manner of consensus, but it's the history being accepted in a manner of consensus. I don't know if that's a big difference, but I just wanted to add to that point.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and you're absolutely right. The individual block candidate is being done by everyone who is working on a valid block, a valid proof of work. So everyone is creating his own candidate block to propose to the network, and agreed that the moment of consensus comes not with creating the block, with creating the information, but rather with approving it and adding it to the blockchain after the proof of work has already been done.
Exactly.
After the building of the block has already been done.
Yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say, but you found the better words, I guess. I'm still learning this English stuff, this English speaking. But to go back to your point about other uses of the Bitcoin protocol or blockchain, however you want to call it, well, there's a lot of use cases that we probably don't even dare to imagine right now. In the 80s, and probably also the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when the internet got developed, people imagined a lot of stuff of what the internet could do. Basic messaging was totally obvious that that will happen, because the internet was pretty much designed to guarantee basic messaging in a censorship-resistant manner. So, but then nobody would have thought about using the internet to rent somebody's house, like Airbnb, or to have your fridge communicate with your local supermarket or your local food supplier. Nobody would have thought of that. That was far away science fiction at best. So I guess there's a lot of use cases for Bitcoin and its blockchain that we can't yet imagine, and that are totally nebulous to us right now. But there's still a bunch of stuff that we can, of course, imagine, like more elaborate scripts on top of Bitcoin, such as smart contract solutions. But there's still a lot of difficulties that have to be worked out when it comes to smart contracts in particular, because you can set up a smart contract and you can call it all like dry code and super decentralized and censorship resistant. It's all great, but you haven't really solved any problem with it. Especially when it comes to the Oracle problem, because as far as I understand, the whole point of a smart contract is to remove third parties like judges and so on, who have to decide on certain matters if it comes to disputes, and instead having a blockchain decide authoritatively and automatically. But as to this point, there's no real solution to the Oracle problem, that you don't have a solution to, there's no decentralized solution to say what external thing outside of the blockchain, like it's like 21 degrees, okay, who decides if it's 21 degrees Celsius outside? You need someone to decide that. And having a decentralized entity decide that on top of a system with incentives is really hard to do. So that's pretty much an open question. so far. Yeah, but I don't want to take up too much time.
Yeah, that was interesting what you said about smart contracts, and that seems to be one of the buzzwords of choice as well, along with the blockchain. That we need smart contracts. I think of what was it that Vitalik said that he wished he coined rather than the smart contract? I think it was a very boring name for a protocol. I can't even remember it. I think smart contract, it can be a little bit of a misleading term when you're talking about cryptocurrencies, and especially when you're talking about sound money, because what you're essentially talking about is something you can program, like programmable money. That's also something that you hear talked about, but it always comes down to that you need some kind of an arbiter for this kind of systems, or an oracle, which might necessarily not be a bad thing. In my opinion, I think there can be use for this kind of like centralized services that can be provided, but you have to understand that it's not a trustless system. It is a trusted centralized system, but it can be still, maybe in some cases, like for example, esports betting might be something that is a use case for real life people. Might not be make the world so much better and cooler, but it's certainly something that people like to do, playing video games, and which is, I feel like it's also another great use case that is going to be the virtual reality and video game money and digital scarce assets and stuff like that. What do you guys think?
Oh, fascinating discussion, and I agree. Like this smart contract meme is really hyped up a lot, and I do like the term programmable money much more because, well, there are two parts, right? Programmable and money. What is a money? A money is a good, a boring thing. It can be a rock or a shell or a piece of silver. It doesn't matter, but it is basically a thing. And this thing can be stupid as hell. You don't have to be able to program money, right? Silver coins are not programmable. It's just a stupid thing that you exchange and keep for safekeeping. So the interesting aspect comes when you have a really stupid thing like Bitcoin, which does one thing and one thing only, which is verifying signatures and hashes and basically getting to a consensus of who owns what within this digital network. And that is the most basic and stupid part, just a boring money. But then what you can do, having established such a digital scarce good, is that you can then start using it in digital ways. And the interesting thing is that the process of creating the monetary unit through the Bitcoin blockchain and consensus, Nakamoto consensus, and using that programmable money might be completely different, or not so completely. But for example, the Lightning Network is a smart contract. It is a form of programmable money. It takes the same boring base unit, the base digital thing of Bitcoin, and it morphs it and programs it into something which is apparently much more useful, with instant transactions and no fees and all the yada, yada, yada. So the basic distinction, that's something that Simon talked about earlier, between the base monetary asset and the entire rest of the network is really interesting. Simon, where would you take this programmable money thing?
Well, people like to look for the killer future or killer app or whatever of Bitcoin or other blockchains and projects. But I think most people don't even recognize that being able to hold a asset, a digital asset, and to send it from your computer to someone else's computer and have him control it, that's a killer app in itself. That's so revolutionary if you start to think about how the normal financial system or the legacy financial system works. Because when we look at where we're drifting at in terms of cashless societies and the like, you will quickly find yourself not owning anything. Because once your money is digital, but you don't have a bare asset or a base money unit in your own hands in form of a key, you don't own anything. You simply own an IOU at best. And an IOU is not worth a lot of things, in my opinion. You may have a legal right to it and a claim, but, well, you're still not holding that asset. It's someone else holding that asset. And most people just gloss over that and like take it for granted, but it's not. It should not be taken for granted. It's a truly revolutionary thing. So yeah, I guess it's straight off from your question. So you may have to rephrase it because I can't remember.
No, perfect. Really, absolutely. And I would further maybe add or maybe should just send off the question to Niko. Basically, the same is what are or what do you think about the base asset and how can it be morphed into other digital things after we have created scarcity online?
Well, I mean, to me, it seems like that's what I would do in the future. Of course, it's hard to say what the future brings. There might be a better protocol tomorrow and I'll change. But at the moment, it seems like I would like to keep in a majority of my assets in a protocol that I trust the most, and then just swap using different layer 2 or 3 solutions, and maybe some sidechain solutions like Liquid, I think, is one of those sidechain solutions similar to that could do atomic swaps with the tokens that I need if there's really such a moment that you would actually need some tokens, which I find not so likely. I think 95% of the use cases of the tokens nowadays in these so-called blockchain projects could be replaced by Bitcoin with different scaling solutions and layers on top. What do you think, Simon?
Yeah, well, I just thought about a book I just read or listened, to be exact, listened a few days ago or just a day ago, and it's a book that Max recommended to me a few weeks ago, and it's from Rothbard, What Did Government Do to Our Money? And basically in that book, Rothbard pretty much destroys the whole token ICO craze. He just uses different terms. Instead of using the term token and ICO or whatever, he talks about himself creating a coin called the Rothbard and trying to go to the free market with it and have someone accept it. And obviously nobody would accept it as a medium of exchange because it's totally worthless. And he goes into a little bit more detail about that. But it just I found it really funny because it totally reminded me about the whole token ICO craze, which I took for I guess normal because I came into this whole scene pretty much in the lead up to the all-time high, and I was on Facebook in some group. No, I'm not on Facebook anymore. Don't worry. But I was on Facebook in a group that, well, yeah, you had just everyone screaming around and calling for the next big 100% gain or whatever on a token. And what's the newest token and whatever, newest medical chain token, newest shared AI something token, it's really just hype. If you look at the substance, there's really no substance left. It's nothing. It's totally worthless and totally uninteresting. It's pure marketing and nothing else. But of course, I came to that realization a little bit later, as I learned about Bitcoin, and so I think it's very important to learn about Bitcoin first if you enter this space, because if you don't understand Bitcoin, you really don't understand anything in this space.
Oh yeah, and shout outs go to Matt Bitcoins, who's currently in Frankfurt suffering on a blockchain conference, which is always a tragic place to go to, with a lot of hype and a lot of buzzwordiness. And the buzzword bingo is strong, especially with blockchain. So that absolutely. But he'll stick through it. I know.
Yes, I think of it a little bit like, let's say, the invention of the automobile, and you would have people running around and calling the automobile the greatest invention ever. It's so cool. You can just hop into it and you can drive anywhere you want. Nobody can hold you back. It's yours. It's your property. It's so great. You don't have to rely on horses anymore. It's so easy. Just put in a little bit of fuel and it runs. And then you would have the blockchain people coming along and saying, well, nah, that automobile is so uninteresting, it's so stupid. The suspension is the really interesting technology behind it, because with a suspension you can build all kinds of stuff. And that's the really interesting part. Fuck the automobile. So I think of the whole blockchain craze a little bit like that, but I think it will cool down eventually.
Oh yeah, really true, and that is the technology behind Bitcoin is really just a database. So that's pretty much it. It is a stupid internet token, right? It is just a number within a set of other numbers, and with some fancy mathematics around it. But basically, right, that's the base layer asset. And
But Max, I have a question for you. Or maybe Nico, maybe you can answer it as well. Rothbard talks about Austrian economics, sorry, of course, and he mentions that a sound money, has to start as a useful commodity, like gold did. It was useful. It had ornamental value, and it had some kind of use case outside of money that people liked. So obviously, Bitcoin doesn't really have that ornamental value, and it's really only useful as a money. Well, I would say in the most basic layer. So, what are your thoughts? Your thoughts on that? Nico, do you know? Could you answer that?
Well, of course I could, but I'm not gonna. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I agree totally. Like, what good is money that if you don't have any liquidity, if nobody wants it, basically, right? So you gotta have something that is, first of all, desirable, and people want to hold on to it, and then people can trust that in the future they can still trade it for something of value, which at the moment we don't really have, apart from gold, maybe. So yeah, I would agree with you. And I would agree with Rothbard, which I'm also happy that you brought him up, because I recently, thanks to Max, started reading as well. I haven't read that one. I really thought it was hilarious to find out that Rothbard was about to launch his own coin, humorously, of course. But yeah, he was a visionary, of course, in many things. And I would recommend reading him as well. I've read the Man, Economy and State with Power and Market, which was an amazing book. So highly recommend.
Oh yeah, read Rothbard, use Bitcoin. That's just what you have to do. Honestly, Rothbard is amazing, especially in context with Bitcoin. And I encourage you to read the What Has Government Done to Our Money? It's a really short pamphlet, like I think only 180 pages in a rather small size. So it's completely doable. It's like a day's worth of read. Not even. So and try every time you read gold, just put their Bitcoin in your mind, and it works perfect. So that's when you can have some fun with Rothbard. Simon, you brought up a good point, and the question that Rothbard posted: does the money need to have this other use case other than a monetary use case? And what he's talking here about is basically the regression theorem, which was especially explained by Ludwig von Mises in the book A Theory of Money and Credit, which is amazing. probably the most technical and most advanced book on monetary economics ever written, so read that as well. And he is basically saying that when we are in a pure state of barter, so there's only barter exchange going on so far in this hypothetical construct of the economy. And the question is, what would the economic actors do? And basically his argument that it is that once you have a good that is widely spread throughout the market, because everyone values it, not for a monetary reason, but just for having it around for some other non-monetary use. For example, gold as jewelry, or cows as labor units, and meat, of course. And then once you have these widely spread out goods, they are actually becoming a store of value, which later gives them use as a medium of exchange, and eventually as the unit of account. And that was what Ludwig von Mises developed and Rothbard further advanced upon. But I think a big breakthrough, especially in the progression of money, came from Nick Szabo in his amazing book, Shelling Points on the Origins of Money. Great, phenomenal book. And he is basically saying that first, a money has to be a collectible, just something that you like to collect, whatever it is, a scarce good that is collectible. So it has some non-monetary use. Then you develop the store of value aspect that you actually do want to hold on to it so that you have more economic value in the future. Then it transitions to a medium of exchange that people know that other people would like to have this good. So they buy it in order to sell it later to acquire a production and consumption good. And eventually, the money is going to reach the unit of account standard, which is when all the economic transactions are calculated and the economic resources are allocated based on prices that are paired against this unit of account, this money. And that is when a money has finally reached its ultimate form, so to say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially if you talk about collectibles as the first stage. I guess with gold or any other metal, the collectible part is easy to understand because it's a nice shiny piece of metal. You would like to collect it, obviously. I guess Austrian economists wouldn't really see that value in Bitcoin from the get-go because it's digital. You can't feel it, you can't touch it, you can't look at it, you can't do anything with it besides use it as money, really. But in my estimate, it reached the collectibles phase precisely because it was the best, I guess, money ever created. If it hadn't got, or if it wouldn't have these properties, if the UTXO, the basic coin, wouldn't have a connection to the Bitcoin network that provides censorship-resistant transactions, it would have never become that collectible. So I think that's an essential part to that collectible phase, because if it weren't, there would literally be no use to hold an UTXO. It would be like a random piece of data, like any piece of data you have in your computer besides that has no monetary value. So yeah.
Yeah, the question is, did Bitcoin actually have a non-monetary use case beforehand? And I would argue, yeah, it clearly did. Why? What was the first Bitcoin transaction ever? That was from Satoshi Nakamoto to Hal Finney. I think it was something like 10 Bitcoin or something. So this was a transaction of some Bitcoin. And that was before Bitcoin had any monetary value. You couldn't buy anything with Bitcoin. You couldn't exchange it against pretty much anything. And that's why Satoshi gifted it to Hal Finney. It was a gift. I don't think that that Hal Finney gave something back in order, other than, of course, his dedication and his amazing amount of work for the Bitcoin network and ecosystem code. But still, it was a gift. And then even further, Bitcoin first had a price in 2010 where it was traded against US dollars. And then it had a real true barter use case when it bought the famous Bitcoin pizza back in 2011, I think. So there was this state of Bitcoin being a science project, just a collectible among some nerds, and without any monetary use case. What do you think, Niko?
Yeah, that's interesting. That kind of ties into the whole messaging protocol. That actually, what are we sending? Are we sending happy thoughts? Are we sending? But clearly, we are sending something that we can then later claim that is ours by holding the keys and presenting them, and then once we agree that this is an established thing that we can trust, fully hold. Like if you would compare it to an emailed document, like let's say that you have a PDF, and if you send it to somebody, then that specific PDF would cease to exist in your computer and all your systems, and would instantly transfer to the receiver, who would then hold it and would have no way to duplicate it or double spend it or double send it rather, in that case.
Yeah, I guess you could rephrase the question of what are more use cases for Bitcoin. You could rephrase that by asking for what are use cases for digital scarcity, because that's essentially what Bitcoin is. It's the first digital scarce good that can be sent over the internet in a censorship resistant manner.
Well, Simon, and if you give me a chance to talk about scarcity, then I will absolutely take you upon that.
Go on.
Because it's such a fascinating topic. And so the question is, what is scarcity, right? Scarcity means that if Alice has something and she hands it over to Bob, does she give up the control over that good? If Alice has this pen and she gives it over to Bob, well, Alice no longer has a pen. So she has fully relinquished her control and access and ownership over this scarce good and given it to Bob. But what about an information, right? If Alice is talking to Bob and just sharing her words and ideas, well, Bob now has them, right? Because Alice did talk, but Alice still controls her thoughts and ideas. So she did not give away her ideas, but she has shared her thoughts. And that's the basic difference and reason why information is a non-scarce good. Therefore, there is no conflict over who owns these ideas. And therefore, we don't need prices to allocate these private property resources. And that's why the internet is such a beautiful technology, because it lets us share information with anyone who is interested in receiving them. Anyone who is part of this network of nodes in this huge, vast ecosystem has access to pretty much all the information that is accumulated in this network, including this video, right? However, on the digital space especially, you can copy these informations as much as you want, which is perfect for information. That's exactly what we want. But it sucks as a money, because money is fundamentally, first and foremost, a scarce good, a good that when Alice gives to Bob, she no longer has it. That's why silver is a useful money, because when you hand it over, you relinquish all control. Bitcoin introducing this scarce asset out of this vast network of non-scarce goods is beautiful, really, when you think about it, because it is creating something truly rare by words. So we have manipulated our ideas and our words and our written language in computer code to make something that is truly scarce, that you can relinquish full control over by saying something, which is insane.
Yeah, man, totally agree. You put that really nicely. Congratulations, I could have not said it better. But I saw you talking about scarcity versus rarity, or how you pronounce that. Could you maybe dive into that a little bit, because I maybe didn't fully understand the actual difference between those two.
Well, that might go a bit really into just semantics and how to say different things. So what I'm presenting just is my personal definition of how I use these terms. And with scarcity, it is this thing: do you relinquish full control? And that is a 0 to 1 statement. Either Alice no longer has the pen or no longer has the good, then that's it. It is a scarce good, period. So the attribute of scarcity is either it is or it is not. And the thing is, one good can have different aspects of the scarcity. For example, this notebook, it is physically paper, right? And this physical paper is non-scarce. When Alice hands this paper over to Bob, she no longer has it, right? However, the information and my notes being taken here in this notebook, this is actually information. And that part of the good is completely non-scarce. So the information that Alice has read and afterwards handed over the scarce book, she still retains the information if she has memorized it, right? So a good can have both attributes of scarcity and non-scarcity, but it's always a 0 to 1 attribute. Rarity is, for me, just a quantity. How many pages are in this notebook? Well, 100. So the rarity is 100, and therefore the quantity. And rarity then just defines that there are not many of them. So, for example, let's say I have 2 bananas and 1 peach, a pear, not peach, pear. That means that the pear is rarer than the bananas because I have quantity 2, quantity 1. So 1 is rarer than 2. But that is a quantitative thing and not a question of the attribute of ownership and relinquishment of control.
Okay, well, I would agree, but I interpreted it a little bit different. I'll try to put it simply. I would look at gold as scarce and rare, but it's scarce. I would go for scarce because there's, I guess, a lot of gold, but it has an infinite, a finite amount. There's only so much gold on Earth, and no matter what you do, there's not more. There's just that amount of gold on Earth. But art, for example, may be rare because there's only one piece of art from one certain artist, but the artist could produce more of that art, and then it would still be rare. I guess that's not really definable. What's rare? Is 1 rare? Is 10 rare? Is 10,000 rare? Is it rare if every 10th person has one of those? Is it rare? I don't know. But rare is something that isn't there in a finite amount necessarily, but is there, like it can be produced again and again, but it's still pretty rare, meaning that there's not a lot of it. Am I talking gibberish, Niko?
No, I was just thinking the true utility that Bitcoin can offer for the people, I feel like is going back to satisfying needs instead of wants. Like there's been talk about this abundance in information and basically everything nowadays. Like everything seems to be more abundant than before, almost regardless where in the world you live. So where does this come from, and is it warranted? And I feel like fiat money has played a big role in inflating this kind of abundance bubble, which might be popping soon. So Bitcoin provides a hedge for that. It provides a solid ground to stand on. And well, if you have a very heavily deflatory currency, which I believe that Bitcoin is, due to the increase in demand and decrease in supply. Every 4 years, there's a halving of the mining reward. I do believe that the value would go up, and then that will mean that people like us, I'm speaking of myself, of course, I'd rather not sell if I don't absolutely have to. So I will very carefully weigh my options. Do I really need this, or is this a want? And more often than not, you can just let go of those wants and you'll be happy that you did, because then you will have more resources to use for something that is truly meaningful for you. Let's say a family vacation or something like that. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good thing for people, and this may be the hidden utility that people don't realize to maybe being misled by the system to think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the system.
Oh, really interesting that the dichotomy you bring up between this abundance that we currently have, but that is fundamentally based on fiat money, on weak money. And I do believe that abundance can be achieved through prosperity and eventually economic freedom, or ultimately. And the interesting thing is that we have had anything but economic freedom on a true fundamental sense, and still have achieved quite a lot of prosperity, especially in Europe and Africa, America. And the question is that just a show how far humankind has already gotten, right? The move towards more liberation and more economic freedom, and thus more prosperity. Did that already progress so much throughout human history, or is it really that we could have been even like much higher and already much further advanced if we had a true freedom on the entire planet, which is interesting. And your aspect of having a bubble that it has inflated this abundance, I like the term abundance bubble. That's quite nice. And that it is backed by fiat money, I agree. Especially because fiat money is money that you can easily produce. It is not rare. And a nice differentiation that you brought up, Simon, and that is also something that Saifedean talks about in the Bitcoin Standard, is that money has to be difficult to produce. And if it is easy to produce, like paper receipts or like notes on your central bank Excel sheet, then this means that fundamentally it can be inflated, and which will make it a weak money and a loose, unsound money. So absolutely, this has happened, and this means that we have, as an economic consequence, overproduction on one side. So you build many more houses than you need in 2004, 5, 6, and then it all crashes because you realize no one actually wants to have them in 2007, 8, 9, 10. And same or contrarily to that, on the consumer side, you have overconsumption. People think that they are super value, and they consume and they consume and they consume. They live truly in this abundance bubble. They think that they have a lot, but they actually don't, which they realize as soon as the monetary economy gets restricted again. And then they realize that first, the entrepreneurs have invested in stupid stuff, and second, no one has money to buy anything. So that is a double punch, which might pop this abundance bubble. Beautiful term.
Yeah, right. And I was just thinking about what it means, or what it would mean if this whole system would disintegrate in the next few years. And I pretty much came to the conclusion that no matter what you would have, you'd be pretty, well, I would say fucked, because everyone is fucked in this economy. But the important thing is that you're less fucked in relation to other people, because other people will be holding non-scarce goods, such as fiat money, and you will be holding Bitcoin, a truly scarce good, pretty much the only truly scarce good there exists. The only thing that you could also have would be property and stuff like that. But still, these things, I would say, more easy to confiscate, especially property, because it just takes a few people, a few policemen, or a few soldiers, or a few thieves, for what it's worth, to take away your property. And to take away your private keys is possible as well, but it's much harder, I would say. And you could go to the extreme and like do brain vaults and stuff like that, but I wouldn't recommend that in most cases, only in really big emergencies.
That's an interesting point you bring up, Simon, about digitizing real life assets. And of course, everybody can agree that you can't really put real life assets on the blockchain, like, for example, banana or milk cartons or anything like that. The same thing, you can't really put your ownership of your Lamborghini or your apartment. I mean, you can put the ownership, but you can't put the actual physical thing in the blockchain. So it will be subject to people respecting your claim. So I mean, of course, you can't entirely fix the ownership issue. However, you can make it a great deal better than the current system, which still involves a lot of paperwork and stuff just to own things or transfer assets. So stuff like that we can improve on the current world, and maybe probably in the future world we will still have ownership of things. So I think that's going to be one of the legit use cases. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, when you talk about owning things, I would say there's a trend to not owning things. And especially when talking about software, it's all the more common to not own software. You rent it. For example, Photoshop or Lightroom. You just pay a monthly fee to use that software. And the same goes for apartments. You pay rent, you don't own that apartment or the land you live on. And I think that trend will continue with cars, because in the future, you probably won't be owning cars, because owning a car is bloody inefficient if you really think about it, because most of the time you're driving around in it totally alone. So the future will be having a public transporting system, maybe from a free market or maybe from the state. That's to be seen. But a public transporting system that will give you a pod of some sort and transport you to where you want to go, maybe with other people, but it will be done by computers. So it will be way more efficient, but you won't be owning it. And this trend will continue with a lot of things. And Bitcoin is, I would say, a counterculture to that, because you can actually own something. You can own money. Half of every transaction. That's a big thing. Max, you wanted to say something about that?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to quickly add that yeah, you're absolutely right. We are moving away from the way we own things nowadays. Like, I don't think in the future anybody will own a full car. They might own 1/100th of a car or 1/1000th of a car, and probably same for the apartments. I mean, why would you own a whole apartment if you could own a fraction of apartment, and then maybe from this kind of system you could then choose where you would live and use your tokens or your claim to access those apartments, like keys, for example, or cars for the same matter. What do you think?
Well, the question is that, though, I agree with you, Simon, that you say that the end user might not be the ultimate owner of the car or of the house, and he's renting it, right? Absolutely valid, yes. The question, though, is who owns the house? Who is the individual user paying the rent to? Because someone needs to own the car, right? If we still live in a capitalistic-based society, in a private property-based society, because that is what capitalism is all about fundamentally, is private property. Who owns what? And that is the inherent problem with scarce goods, right? If Alice likes her pen and she does not want to give it away, but Bob still comes and takes it, well, that is making Alice sad. And we need to figure out a way to structure that both are better off. And that is, if you come down to it, private property. That means if Alice has homesteaded this, if she has built it herself out of natural resources, then it's hers. It's her private property. And because we have this attribute of complete ownership, that means that we can allocate resources effectively. Because if Alice really wants and needs to have this pen, she's not going to give it away for Bob. And if Bob really wants to have the pen, then he needs to provide her something in exchange that Alice deems more valuable. And therefore, the resources are allocated to those people that need them the most. Of course, willing that they are paying for it, and you prove your willingness to own the thing and to use it after you have voluntarily exchanged it, after you've acquired it in payment for a good or service. And the question of what do you do then with your ownership? Do you consume it yourself? Do you use it in further production, or do you let other people consume it? And if you would like to let other people consume your own goods, well, they are going to pay some form of rent or lease or whatever. But yes, clearly these allocations of resources are still possible, and ultimately there has to be a true owner of the good. Niko, what do you think?
Yeah, I just wanted you to quickly clarify. Are you arguing that you can't own a fraction of a pen, for example? Or you should be the sole owner of the whole thing?
Well, ultimately, you have to have one ultimate beneficiary of the thing, right? Only one person can have this pen and actively use it in writing stuff down. This can only be done by one person. And now the question is, how do we allocate which person that is going to be? It can only have one ultimate beneficiary, and that has to be figured out somehow. Now, having a right to say over who will use this, having ownership in that sense, and the right to control the asset, as Stefan Kinsella would define, that can be several persons. We can say that both Niko and Simon now own this pen, legally speaking, and they have the true right of delegating what to do with it. Then they can, for example, say, okay, Niko is going to use it on Monday, and Simon is going to use it on Tuesdays. And still, on one individual day, the pen can only be used by one person. But the decision-making over who that one person shall be, that can be split up.
You know, Max, that will be done by smart contracts.
Well, exactly. It can be done by anything. We just need to find a nice and efficient legal manner of doing it. And smart contracts are perfect for that. Multi-signature, that's beautiful.
Yeah, but smart contracts sounds way cooler, you know. Multi-signature and all that stuff. That's come on, that sucks. You need the buzzwords, man.
Give me multi-sig and hash time lock contract, and I will be jittery as hell and go away with your CryptoKitties.
Multiple signatures. That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, actually, when you talk about multi-signatures, do you have a good application that you can use to implement multi-signature solutions right now?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, this is one of the amazing apps that was built on the or in conjunction with the WCN, the World Crypto Network. And of course, one app that we are currently sharing a lot is Tallycoin, as we see it right here, made by our good friend DJ Booth. And it's amazing. So if you would like to donate to the Konsensus Ry and up our production quality, right here is the QR code. And let's copy. Oh, look at how useful that is. We can just copy the Bitcoin address in the chat. So that is one amazing wallet or app that has been created in conjunction with the WCN. Before that, there was, upon many others, here the Mistos wallet, which is a distributed funds with Mistos. It is basically the most beautiful multi-signature wallet that you could imagine up to this point. It works with Blockstack, a Bitcoin-based identity system, so to say, and with decentralized storage and lots of cool stuff with Blockstack. But basically, you log in with your unique Blockstack ID that is backed by Bitcoin security with some hash commitment, not sure. But then you can use different mnemonic seeds and different addresses in the back end of this wallet. And you can add partners and subtract partners easily with their Blockstack ID. And then you have them in this multi-signature. And you can start payment proposals, make or propose this multi-signature. And then everyone has to either click on accept or deny on their individual end. And basically, it's a perfect, super usable and ready right now, both on testnet and mainnet, working and beautiful for amazing multi-signatures. Oh, and we just received a donation on Tallycoin. Look at that. That is amazing. So thank you very much for donor 0.0035. That's really nice of you. And you're using SegWit, which is awesome. So double thank you.
Good job.
So yeah, Mistos, it's amazing.
Yeah, I didn't know about that. It looks really and easy to use.
Oh, and it is actually. I I be using it personally, and I use it in all of our decentralized projects that are like flat organization-wise. We don't even have companies in most of them. And Mistos is perfect solution for managing funds in a project like that, because then everybody either agrees or disagrees. And then if there's any kind of trouble makers, then the rest of the group can vote those bad actors out. So there's really no, it just works. It's like Bitcoin. There's nothing extra there. I highly recommend you check it out. Definitely can be useful.
So it's basically democracy over funds. The majority decides who's in the pool in which the funds are saved, and if the majority agrees, the funds get paid out. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. That's the way. I think that's the only way that you can use it now. You have to agree fully to transfer any funds. But I do believe there's coming like 2 out of let's say rather 3 out of 5 type of scenario also. So you could decide how many signatures are needed actually. But right now it has to be anonymous.
Yeah, and I guess that the multi-signature capabilities at this point with ECDSA and so on are pretty reduced. I mean, you can't have hundreds of people signing keys in a multi-signature solution right now, as far as I know.
Well, I do think that Mistos is working up to 15 participants. Not sure, don't quote me on that.
Really? Okay.
And I'm not 100% certain if it is integrated, but if not, it should be coming if they can secure more funding, which would be nice, because it truly is an amazing product. Would be the 2 out or N out of M multi-sigs, which are extremely useful. And with cool stuff like Schnorr signatures coming, you can have potential multi-signatures that are represented with one signature on the Bitcoin main chain with key aggregation over Schnorr. And lots of other amazing stuff coming. And shout out to HODL, the decentralized, not so decentralized peer-to-peer cryptocurrency exchange, mostly Bitcoin, because they have just recently, yesterday, they have released their HODL 2 out of 3 multi-signature escrow, which is really, really nice. So now we have 2 out of 3 multi-sigs on HODL, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, so this may be a little off topic, but I'll try to go into it because I have a question to both of you. I just had this like a random thought at work today, and I guessed I would need some kind of libertarian to answer it. So talking about taxation, let's just begin with the question about taxation in Bitcoin. How would the state tax people in a Bitcoin system where Bitcoin is the pretty much only used money, and people are free to use addresses as they please? They are free to generate new addresses as they please. They don't have to use state addresses, because that would be a possibility to tax people if every address would be provided by the state. But just assume that it would be like it is now, free and open. How would the state tax the people? Could you answer that, Niko?
Are you asking me how could the state use Bitcoin to tax the people?
No. How would the state even know how much Bitcoin you own? Because he can't just go, or the state can't go to the bank and ask for your balance. It can't, because you have no like one account at one bank. You have maybe hundreds or thousands of UTXOs, which only you know the key to them. So how would the state even get to know what you own?
Well, this is the beautiful part about future money, because nobody can prove that they don't own any cryptocurrencies. Nobody can say that with absolute certain that they don't own any cryptocurrencies. At least there's no conclusive way to prove either way. So that can provide everybody plausible deniability in that. So to answer your question, it's a return to the 80s, or even before that, the return of the cash. So it will be up to the individual to comply, which is, of course, as it always is, and as it should be. People should have the freedom to opt in and out of systems.
Yeah, it's it's really great that you come to that conclusion, because that goes into that question I have been asking myself. So you mentioned people having or should be able to choose if they want to opt in. So I had this thought. Let's say you had to pay taxes, so the system wouldn't be like you or most libertarians would like it to be. But you would be you would be forced to pay a certain amount of tax. So the difference from today would be you could choose what you want to pay those taxes for. You would have different categories. You could choose military spending, you could choose welfare, you could choose immigrants, you could choose anything you want that the state spends money on. So people would be free to give money. They would not be free to not give money, but they would be free to choose where the money goes to. So basically, the right-wingers could go and spend money on the military and whatever they want to, and the left-wingers could spend the money on their issues, and there would be no discussion in politics over what the state will spend its money on, because people decided in a decentralized manner right at the point when they gave their money. What do you guys think about that?
Well, the question in general, if Bitcoin can still be used in a taxation system, is, well, actually, if you really think about it, no, not really, or at least in the really narrow sense. Because what is taxation? It is per definition a involuntary payment that has been extracted under the threat of coercion and threat of violence at gunpoint, basically. If I can have right here, right? Your money or your life. That's basically what taxation is saying. So thank you for Ludwig von Mises for that. And those two are radicals, by the way. So having a non-voluntary payment being the definition of a taxation, well, then Bitcoin, in its truest sense, cannot be used in taxation, because you do sign with your private key the transaction which will eventually remove the Bitcoin from your account and send it to the account of the tax authority, which is inherently on the really base layer a voluntary act, because you had to provide the signature. And if you use Bitcoin correctly and have your keys stored on the cold card or another good hardware wallet, then you have given your voluntary consent to at least the private key signing the transaction. However, there still could be physical violence, and especially coercive and threats of violence at place in meat space, so to say, outside of Bitcoin. But inherently, Bitcoin is, per definition, a voluntary-based system. And with every transaction and with every signature, you prove that consent. So Bitcoin, in this sense, can, I don't think, be used as taxation. But of course, the state can still continue. And having different models of taxation, while might being interesting of allocating funds more efficiently, I think would all fundamentally fail because there are no prices within a tax-based system, because it inherently is not voluntary, right? So no prices, no price calculation, which will ultimately lead to malinvestments and overconsumption on the sides of the government.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I thought Niko would want to say something. Didn't want to burst in. Yeah, I guess. You dodged my question, Max. You declared it doomed and failed before it even started. You didn't even ponder my point.
Well, okay, then maybe more specifically on this hierarchical-based structure of funding, which is, I was kind of laughing while you said that, because basically that's how the B Foundation is structured, and there is a lot of hype and uncertainty about the B,
Oh.
and it really has this hierarchical tree structure. So you have a Bitcoin account all the way on the top that represents the entire organization. And if you donate to this specific Bitcoin address, it will be used for overall expenses of the B. Then under that, you have different branches, and I don't know the specific labels, but basically you would have one for research, you would have one for code development, you would have one for maybe a specific or for marketing, and then for scholarships, stuff like that. And then under each of these branches, you have another set of tree, each with their own Bitcoin donation addresses. For example, in the research department, to research more on confidential transactions, or to research more on Schnorr signatures or Lightning Network or whatever. And then you have on the code development side, you maybe have, okay, let's build some more Lightning wallets, or let's work on that API or whatever. So you would have all the way from overall payments to the top to all the way down to maybe even individual projects. You say these funds go directly to the wallet implementation of the next C Lightning client, for example. So having that kind of structure is possible, of course. The question is, will governments use it? Probably not, because they do like control, and that ultimately takes away control over funds from bureaucrat hands to the free market, which is not what governments are all about.
Man, I didn't even think about the B Foundation. Yeah. Didn't consider that, but you're totally right. It's pretty much the structure I thought about. And talking about the B Foundation, Niko, would you like to say something about that?
Not necessarily about B Foundation. We can talk about that as well. I don't find it super interesting, to be honest.
Okay, let me just make one point about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Before we go away. So it's not specifically about the B Foundation, but I just saw today that Luke Dash Jr. is having problems funding his work on Bitcoin. And I just wanted to remind people that you can donate to developers and researchers independently. You don't need a B Foundation. You don't need any kind of foundation. You can do it on your own in a decentralized manner, because it will be more efficient that way than you giving money to someone else to give it to someone else. So consider maybe choosing one or two of your favorite devs, or maybe all of them, and sending them a small amount of money, a small amount of Bitcoin to help them out, because they're putting a lot of effort and work into this system, and you're profiting from it if you're listening to this, most probably. So yeah, just consider that.
Absolutely. Let me just jump in 1 second before Niko. This is because this is so important, Simon. Really making sure that we protect our own and that we take care of our own. And these developers have dedicated so much time to work on this protocol, work on this level. And it's not that they are all super rich because they were early in Bitcoin. Most of them were poor bastards back then, and they didn't have any money to invest in Bitcoin. And rather than selling government organizations about blockchain hype and getting money through that, they actually sat down and coded, right? Cypherpunk, right? Code. And they did that instead of earning lots of money and investing into Bitcoin like others did. And they actually have invested a lot. And most of them are really not too rich. And maybe they're well off, but they're definitely not multi-millionaires, although multi-Satoshionaires. So, but yeah, Niko. Donate to the development team. It's important. So, Niko, what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, definitely. I agree. You should, if you want to support anybody, if you want to support us, go ahead. You're free to do so or not to do so. That's the whole point. We don't need a centralized server to really serve any of us, because it always leads. How can it not be inefficient? Of course, it will be inefficient. But yeah, unfortunately, I have to get going. But I just wanted to leave everybody with a final thought about this concept of being cash poor. I'm sure you guys know what it means. It's like when you have a lot of economic assets, but they're not really liquid, or you can't really easily make transactions. So, everybody should probably consider their asset situation at the moment and how liquid they are, and how easily they can be moved or protected if something should go wrong. Like, well, things go wrong in the world all the time. and you might want to reconsider and maybe hedge for the future with different options in future money, and don't become cash poor in the future. And yeah, if you want to reach me, you can see my Twitter name and my Telegram name right there. And if you want to donate to the Konsensus Network production quality, you can use the QR code on that side. Thanks, Max, for the awesome show again. And thanks, Simon, for the awesome ideas and talk. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really nice to talk to you.
Pleasure.
So yeah, Simon, Niko, thank you very much for joining. It was a pleasure as always talking to you. Really looking forward to the next one. And thanks for having us here on the Konsensus Ry channel, which is an awesome network. So please go out and check out the Konsensus Ry YouTube channel. It really is worth it. Simon, what's up with you? Any closing thoughts on what we've talked about so far?
Oh man, I don't know if we should expand this time any longer, but I already mentioned to you a question I have, and are you up for one more question?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with a quote from Murray Rothbard. I wrote this up in really scribbly writing. I can't really decipher it, so I'll try my best. It's important to abstain from patriotic or national names for gold ounces or grains. Once such a label replaces the recognized units of weight, it becomes much easier for government to manipulate the money unit and give it a life of its own. So the question then arrives about or around monetary patriotism. And I really don't get it, because as far as I see on Twitter and so on, you see a lot of libertarians, and I don't actually see the libertarians of being anti-patriotic. They may be anti-state, but does that really mean they're anti-patriotic? Can you be patriotic about your country, the land and the people living in it, but not patriotic about the state? And how does that go together with monetary patriotism? Because if you're an Austrian economist, you cannot be a monetary patriot. And if you're not a monetary patriot, can you be a patriot in a non-monetary way? Like just loving the country and the people in the country. I'm a little bit mixed up on all of these things, so maybe you have some thoughts on it.
Oh, damn, that is a really good question, and quite fascinating, right? Is that there always in history seems to be this drive towards following a leader, and following especially a hierarchical leader. So in a hierarchical organization, in a hierarchical structure, the control flows to the top, and therefore the attention. And people have to follow this leader because he is in control. And of course, one of the most classical hierarchical organizations is the state. So people, therefore, historically speaking, have this drive towards the state leader, oftentimes being a male figure. You see that with a lot of dictators and politicians in general, that they are father figures, right? The founding fathers of America. So this hierarchical structure is, I do think, inherent in anything, basically. But having this hierarchical structure of control and oppression, that is where I do draw the line. So having a normal hierarchy of respect and a mutual voluntary reason, for example, in the local community, for example, in your family, and being closely tied together with this local hierarchy in a voluntary and peaceful manner, of course, is understandable. We humans are social animals, right? And there is inherent hierarchy in any social organization. Voluntary hierarchy, non-controllable hierarchy. And that is where I would draw the line. Now, do people want to connect with their community, and are they proud of their community? Oh yeah, I'm proud of Bitcoin. Like, I'm proud to be part of the Bitcoin community. That is just as much, well, patriotism, if you like to call it, as being proud of your local town or your local nation. So I do think that this tribalism inherently is a human thing, and I do support it as long as it's peaceful. But Niko, you wanted to jump back in because it was such a good question. Damn, Simon even got Niko back.
Yeah, damn you guys, I'm not going anywhere. That was an excellent question. And Simon, I paid attention. You used the term monetary patriotism, and I'm not sure if I've heard that one before. I've always talked about like nationalism and tribalism in money, especially in cryptocurrencies and in everything. But I think, yeah, patriotism in a way kind of makes sense when you think about Bitcoin. And if you think about like what internet has caused us to now we're basically citizens of this global village society that is converging on a common language, which is English, and common messaging protocols, which are, internet, email, stuff like that, and now converging on the Schelling point of money, which will then, I guess, become the money of the so-called homeland, in which sense I would then understand monetary patriotism in a better way. I've always said that the nationalism has never done anything good for the world. Like that normally it's normally a bad manifestation of tribalism, which I account this sports hooligans, for example, as well. Like, my countryman beat your countryman, so ergo I'm going to beat you. This kind of thing is a very unhealthy way to approach things. So I don't think nationalism in itself can be a good starting point. Being proud of something, being proud of being part of something that I guess that makes sense to me. It's a very interesting point you made.
Man, that was right on the money. I would say that the lines between patriotism, monetary patriotism, nationalism, tribalism, it's really hard to define, really, because it comes down to love for something, and patriotism is defined as love for your own, or not love, or maybe, yeah, love. Actually, the definition is love for or devotion to one's country. That's the definition of patriotism. So the question then is, what is country? Is the country the state? Is the country the land, the border, the actual hectares of land? Is the country the people, the social demographic? It's not that easy. The lines get blurred, and I would agree that nationalism is a bad form of tribalism. You're totally right on that, because it doesn't lead to a good outcome. But some people then go on to put patriotism in the same basket as nationalism, which then I don't agree with that, because patriotism isn't inherently bad, in my opinion, because it's basically the same feeling you have for Bitcoin. You like Bitcoin because it's useful, there's a good community, you agree with the values of that system, and that there's nothing bad in that. You're not harming anyone. And having the same feelings for your fellow countrymen or the people in your community isn't bad either. It's totally normal and totally okay. So I don't like when people put nationalism, tribalism, patriotism, and all those things in the same basket.
Oh, really, really fascinating points. I mean, you really have to do more thorough explanation on that entirely. And I really like that has connected some dots in my head, that in my mind, that I thought about for a bit, and it's quite interesting of how this monetary patriotism does apply in Bitcoin. Because yes, we still have all these leaders creating their own altcoins and tokens and nonsense. Let's exclude all these shitcoins, not interesting, right? How does the same national or patriotic monetarism apply in Bitcoin? And I do think, so when Rothbard was saying that, he was talking that there's gold as the monetary base unit, and then the private coin, like I have here a private coin of Murray himself, right? Then this is a user interface to the money. It is useful because it shows the amount, it shows the purity, for the most basic sense, and it has the stamp of approval from the authenticator originally, right, the mint. And of course, now it has like artistic value as well with idols on these coins. But fundamentally, a coinage is user interface. Now, what is the coinage in Bitcoin, truly in Bitcoin? And I do think that something like a wallet really appears to be the private coinage of Bitcoin. It is a unique user interface that can be different for pretty much anything. You can have, for example, here the green address, and that being completely different to the Wasabi wallet. They are different user interfaces, different access points for utilizing your base money. And therefore, when having these different coins, you have competition of the best coin being prevalent, of the best user interface, the best software being used to access and to control these tokens. And so then having patriotic coinage, as Rothbard said it, that you blindly believe in one coin, and therefore it gains a life of its own, that this can be quite dangerous. And I do think we might have seen the same in Bitcoin, where a website like Coinbase has been so prevalently used that it got this patriotic following of, hey, let's all use Bitcoin through Coinbase. Oh no, let's just use Coinbase. Doesn't matter Bitcoin. We're just going to use Coinbase. This specific coinage, the user interface. And that therefore the Coinbase meme of having instant transactions and stuff like that has been prevailed on top of the actual true money, which is Bitcoin itself and not the user interface.
Oh man, you just clarified something for me, which I also read in Rothbard, because it talks about money and how money in a free market would function, because most people think it wouldn't function if everyone could print its own money, but they wouldn't print it, they would only mint it. And before fiat, there was a free market for money. Different banks or individuals, companies, just printed or minted, let's say minted, not printed, minted their coins. But the base unit was gold. And now we have the same situation with Bitcoin. The base unit is Bitcoin. And as you said, the user interface is the wallet. Now you have different wallets, like you had different coins. Now it's a free market to use the wallet you please. And the same way it was a free market to use the coin that you wanted, because some coins were finer and better, had a prettier interface, let's say, than others. So people gravitated to a certain coin. Now, that coin had a name. And now comes the, I would say, the dangerous part. And because that dangerous part basically helped fiat to go into existence, because people didn't call the money gold anymore, or an ounce of gold, or a 20th ounce of gold. They called it dollar, or pound, or whatever coin, thaler, or whatever. And they didn't call it gold anymore. So in essence, that would mean that people wouldn't call the money they're using Bitcoin. They would call it, I will send you Coinbases, or I will send you Samurais, or whatever wallet would prevail. And that's actually a dangerous thing, because if that ever happened, and it could happen pretty much, because people use Coinbase as a wallet. They don't even understand that it isn't really a wallet. It's really something different. Maybe it's custody, yes, but it's not a traditional wallet. And people don't know that. So it could possibly happen that people would start using a wallet and kind of forget about the base unit they're sending, because the wallet would give them such an easy interface. So yeah, thinking about that, wow, that just blew my mind.
Have we broken Bitcoin? Is it over now?
I think so. I have no confidence anymore. Take down the live stream, else the price will plummet before I can sell.
I got the short positions open.
Okay, we're covered.
Oh yeah, but that is fascinating, and I really do like your argument on patriotic monies and the system, and it's quite interesting to maybe see a complete opposite with Bitcoin, a money that is so much leaderless, so much unpatriotic in the hierarchical structure that there is one single leader, but it still creates this patriotism around the leaderlessness, around the self-control and self-governing, and that more this ethics and this mythos um, drives the money and the shelling point, and not a patriotic leader.
Yeah, right. And like Niko mentioned before, there's essentially parts of tribalism and I would say pretty much nationalism to some extent. All of these different ways of thinking manifest themselves in Bitcoin as well, because Bitcoin is more than just a money. It's also, for some people, a community, and it's on the internet, which is the way of communicating. And instead of communicating with your peers on your country's soil or ground, you use the internet to communicate. So essentially, it's the country. Now, you have all these different tendencies of nationalism, tribalism, and patriotism in Bitcoin. And I would call, like, some people call the toxic maximalists or something like that, the bad guys, the really toxic ones. One could compare these to nationalists. They have unquestioned or unquestionable love for their not country. They have love for their coin, Bitcoin, or whatever coin they're basically maximally supporting. And that's not healthy, because you should be questioning what you stand for and what you love on a regular basis. And nationalists, and I would say the bad form of toxic maximalists, don't do that. But there's a tendency of Bitcoin maximalists, and I would say other maximalists, of just loving their coin or their project and loving the values the project resembles. And that's not bad. But in these days, on Twitter and other mediums, Reddit and so on, maximalists or Bitcoin maximalists get put in the same basket no matter what kind of tendency they have of thinking about Bitcoin. Yeah, I'm trying to formulate these thoughts, but it's really hard to formulate them in English.
Well, and the cool thing is that with conversations like these, we get to formulate these thoughts, and that's what's make it so interesting and such delightful conversations, because you literally conversate together, you grow, you advance, and that's why I love this format. And it's really interesting that there might be this toxicity in Bitcoin, right? That this over cockiness, this overconfidence of having of being well lazy in a argumentative way, of not defending your point properly, and of simply stating that because you have skin in the game, that this token, this coin, whatever, that you own, that you have the most skin in the game, is going to be the one that is perfect for everyone else. But I do think that because we all should have some skin in the game with the stuff that we talk about, right? I own Bitcoin, and therefore I do have skin in the game, and am of course incentivized to talk a lot about Bitcoin, not just because it might go up in value, but because I also do want to get positive feedback and get the reaffirmation that what I have put my skin into the game, like what I have invested into, that it actually is valid. So having this hyper focus on Bitcoin, which I'm quite susceptible to, like all these altcoins, I just no longer pay attention because, well, first of all, most of them are truly shit. But then there are others that might be interesting. And of course, this competition is important. But being dulled down by all these banned tokens, nonsensical tokens, plus the immense power of Bitcoin does give you quite a narrow view sometimes, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, right. And to be honest, at least for me, speaking for myself, I would say if you think that hundreds of coins could prevail, and you think you know how hundreds of coins function exactly on a granular level, like in the technical details, you probably don't really understand them, because there's so much things to learn in Bitcoin alone, and so much news to digest, and content to listen, that it's virtually impossible to even keep up with Bitcoin development and news in Bitcoin. And then claiming that you like support other coins as well and know about them as well, and you think they could prevail for XYZ reasons, I just say you probably don't have a clue about anything regarding those coins. Because if you would have a clue, you would virtually be spending 24 hours a day researching all of this stuff. Or you've been in the business, let's say, for years on end. That would be possible as well. But as we see, people who have spent a lot of time in this industry and business and community tend to gravitate to Bitcoin. They don't gravitate to hundreds of altcoins or altcoin projects. So yeah, that's probably all I have to say on altcoins for this evening.
Well, there has been spoken enough. We have wasted enough of these nonsensical subjects. But yeah.
Okay, well, you could talking about altcoins, I'm not finished yet. So, but I'll bring
I thought I could shut you up.
No. You can't shut me up. I'm uncensorable on your stream. No. Talking about altcoins and tokens, the only thing I think about sometimes is the points Andreas Antonopoulos brings up, because he's a believer in like hundreds or thousands or 10,000s of all tokens and altcoins prevailing, and that really doesn't match up with Austrian economic theory of people gravitating to one sound money, one most saleable good. So, but maybe one could interpret his position a little bit differently, or maybe his position is misunderstood. I don't think his position is that there will be thousands of monies all having the same status. His position is there will be one money, probably Bitcoin, and there will be thousands of little currencies, but they will be worthless in essence. They will be maybe worth some imagined value or value to a small amount of people, like a school class. An example he brings up a lot, like kids creating their own tokens in school class and like exchanging them and having fun with them. And that's a plausible scenario. But these tokens would not have any monetary value on the free market. Bitcoin or whatever sound money would prevail would be valuable on the free market. So I think his position is often misunderstood in that sense.
Well, again, what is a money? It is a scarce good. How many tangible, physical, meat space, scarce goods do exist? Well, limitless, right? There are uncountable amounts of scarce goods.
Yeah.
All these individual things are all scarce goods. And we have them for different reasons, because they are so unique and so specialized. And their scarcity is an inherent attribute, right? It just means it is one prerequisite of a money is being scarce. Now, in the digital space, we used to only have non-scarce goods, and you could share them plentifully. But now we have the opportunity of creating scarce digital goods. And that's it, right? That's what Bitcoin did. Scarce digital goods with a decentralized party, like without anyone controlling everything in a free and peaceful market. So now with Bitcoin, we can have billions and uncountable amounts of digital scarce goods, but how many of them will be used as a money? Well, in the free world, how many meat space monies are being used? One. Not even silver, not even this worthless metal here, but gold, probably, because it's a really useful money. And the thing with the digital realm will be quite similar. There will be endless amounts of digital scarce goods, and there will most likely only be one money out of all of them.
Exactly, and that basically destroys the argument by most Keynesian economists nowadays. Their argument is that Bitcoin can't be money because there are thousands of different other cryptocurrencies, and everyone can create them out of thin air. But the same could be said about metals. There's hundreds or thousands of different alloys of metals, and still people gravitated towards gold, even though there's way more sorts of metals they could have used. So the same would be the case of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is in the same position as gold. And it doesn't matter if there's thousands or 100,000s of different tokens and scarce digital currencies, because people will gravitate towards the first, the most liquid, and the most saleable one, and that's Bitcoin.
Precisely. Hopefully it is. We don't know.
Yeah.
But
Well, okay, it's also one argument for Bitcoin and why every altcoin maximalist is, well, how do I phrase it? If Bitcoin fails, your altcoin will fail as well, most probably. Because if Bitcoin failed, what's to say that your altcoin won't fail? So if Bitcoin ever failed, I would have a hard time ever believing in any cryptocurrency following it, because the same could happen to that cryptocurrency. Some kind of black swan event or technical difficulty. Maybe someone saw it, but most people didn't, so nothing happened and it got exploited. After all, it's all a pretty big experiment or at this point, there's nothing to guarantee that this experiment will succeed. I mean, even Matt Corallo, one of the biggest Bitcoin Core contributors, even he gives Bitcoin a chance of succeeding of around 10% now. It was previously 5%. So just take that into consideration when putting all of your money into Bitcoin. It isn't said that this thing will prevail into all eternity. But of all cryptocurrencies, it has the best chance to do so. So yeah, go and diversify into every altcoin you want. I don't see any point in that.
Don't diversify into shitcoins. Diversify into different ways of storing your precious Bitcoins. That's what you should do. Have a cold card. Have two. Have a Trezor. Have another. Use the Wasabi wallet. Use all these great wallets and diversify in UTXOs.
Yeah, diversify into Bitcoin, diversify into Satoshis, diversify into Mbits. Take the unit you want.
That's good. Well, so we've talked about a lot.
Yeah, man.
Looking at my notes, crazy. We went all over the place.
I'm sorry.
Which is amazing. That's exactly how it should be. Because that's just how a walk down the park of Bitcoin space, a fall down the rabbit hole, doesn't go straight. It goes all over the place. So, Simon, where can the people find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter if you want to follow me there. My Twitter handle is Simon Lutz. That's Simon LUTZ21. And I have a website I created for Bitcoin, but it's German or in German. So if you understand German or speak German, you can check it out. It's www.blockinfo.ch. It's still, well, I would say early stages, but I really don't have any time to develop it any further, and it basically covers the basics of Bitcoin and how you could use it, and what you should consider when using it, and what mistakes you shouldn't make. So yeah, if you understand German and want to introduce a friend to Bitcoin, maybe use blockinfo.ch as a way to show them what Bitcoin is.
Oh yes, absolutely. So Simon Lutz 21 on Twitter and bloginfo.ch for all the German speakers out there. It really is an amazing website and really hammers home on all the important points in a quite brief manner. Of course, cool that it has the Ubuntu font, the official Bitcoin font. There's no such thing as the official Bitcoin anything, but it's a cool font, so that's nice.
Yeah, I had to go and ask a computer scientist colleague how to change that thing in WordPress because I'm a total web design noob.
Oh yeah. Well, not everyone has to be perfect web designer. It's quite a specialized skill. And so, Piers, thank you so much for joining Simon and Niko from Konsensus here on the World Crypto Network. Check out the Konsensus YouTube channel and right here the film or the conversation, and also check out. We talked about Open Dime. We talked about shelling out, origins of money. Read Rothbard, obviously. Read Cypherdean, that would be nice. Open source everything, including Mistos, which is amazing. HODLHODL.com, that was cool. 2 out of 3 multi-sig programmable money, amazing. Bisq, also good to show always. So thank you very much for your support here on the Tallycoin. Tallycoin is amazing. You guys are so awesome, having filled up the 0.32. Oh, we got another donation. That is amazing. Thank you so much on the Tallycoin Purism. We've reached a goal. Beautiful sunrise now. And look how beautiful Tallycoin is. Has everything here. Has the video, has the description, has pictures. Cool. So last donation, number 33, came with 0.0077. Thank you. And again, using SegWit, that's perfect. So guys, Piers, thank you so much for joining me here today again. Thank you for Niko and Simon. That was a amazing conversation. Happy gonna do that again on the next show of Future Money. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Piers, and see you in exactly 3.5 hours. So it's going to be a short night for me, talking with Samson Mao about the Liquid sidechain. So let's see how foggy my mind is after 3 hours of sleep and back-to-back Bitcoin conversations here on the World Crypto Network and Konsensus Ry.
Bye, guys.